Welcome to the Bariatric Nutrition Coach Podcast, where we empower you with weight loss surgery, nutrition knowledge, mindset advice, and inspiration so you succeed in your weight and health journey. I'm your host, Jane Stoltz, and I am a bariatric dietitian who has helped over 1,300 people on their weight loss surgery journeys. I'm also a solo mum, lover of long walks while listening to podcasts, partial to a glass of wine, and the ocean is my happy place. Join me as I dive deep into bariatric nutrition and lifestyle topics and deliver them to you in bite-sized, palatable episodes every Monday. Now let's go. Hello and welcome to episode 43 of the Bariatric Nutrition Coach Podcast. And today I wanted to talk about weight regain. And weight regain is such a common challenge, common struggle for people after weight loss surgery. It is something we can talk a lot about because we want to normalize it. And I want to give you information and strategies to manage weight regain. It's so easy to regain weight after having weight loss surgery. When you have your surgery, your body responds by dropping its metabolic rate. And so the amount of energy you need each day as a person that's had bariatric surgery is lower than someone that hasn't had bariatric surgery, even if you are at the same weight. So when old habits come back, and I say when old habits come back because it is not if, it's really when, old habits die hard. And overnight you have surgery and your tummy changes, but your brain doesn't. And those default ways of managing life and eating will come back at some point for everyone, just depends on what stage. And those old eating habits are the ones we're talking about that lead to increases in energy intake, snacking, grazing, night eating, drinking more of your calories. So as they come back into your life, they lead to an increase in your energy intake and hence regain happens. Before we dive into this topic of weight regain and 3 steps to getting back on track, I wanted to share some lovely words from a client that's just finished working with me. Hi, I'm Barbara. I had surgery in 2016 and lost 85 pounds. I've gained back 30. I am 72 and have been on every diet out there and was still looking for the right one when I saw the ad for the Bariatric Nutrition Bootcamp. Working with a bariatric dietitian sounded like the best way to go. After talking with Jane Stoltz, she made me feel like there was hope. I ate, slept, and thought about dieting 24 hours a day. I learned how to think differently about eating, not dieting. After working with Jane, I learned some basic steps to do, and that changed everything for me. I feel a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders. If you're looking for a different approach to weight management, I recommend the Bariatric Nutrition Bootcamp. Thanks for everything, Jane. So I wanted to share those lovely words from Barbara, not only because the struggle that she had and why she came to work with me is very common, and that is about being totally fixated and stuck in that dieting mentality and dieting way of living and counting calories. And we know dieting doesn't work, and if it did work, you would not have needed to take the step of having a bariatric surgery. So she wanted to leave that dieting mindset, that way of eating that was very calorie counting and restrictive, and learn how to, I call it live well, find balance, listen to her body and enjoy life and not have so much energy and brain space spent on dieting and spent on food. And also because Barbara is one of my older clients, and it shows that it doesn't matter what age you are and how long ago you've had bariatric surgery, you can still reach out for support. Some people have expressed to me they felt that, maybe they were too far down the track to get support. Not at all. This is a lifelong journey that you're going through after having weight loss surgery, and it doesn't matter what age or what stage you are. Okay, so let's dive into the episode. So let's talk about weight regain. As I was talking a little bit about the beginning of this podcast, weight regain is a very common challenge, common struggle, and it's really easy to regain weight in the bariatric journey. I want to talk today about how do you feel when you notice weight regain, and also I want to give you 3 steps to work through when you notice weight regain to help you in a really intentional way get back on track. We are not going to be talking about the common habits and reasons for weight regain. I want to talk today and really dig into where do you go in your mind and with actions, with reactions, when you notice weight regain occurring. So first, let's do an exercise. I would love you to imagine you have hopped on the scales, you've noticed the scales going up, or you've put on a piece of clothing and it's fitting a bit tighter than it was previously. What do you start thinking? Where does your mind go? What thoughts come to mind? Are they positive thoughts? Chances are no. They're more likely to be negative thoughts. And that can be, what have I been eating? What have I been doing? I knew I couldn't keep my weight where it was. Whatever those negative thoughts are, it's really a great thing first to identify them, because thoughts then lead to actions and reactions. So often people will say that they feel panic, stress, that whole kind of cluster of emotions that can come up very quickly like a wave when weight regain is noticed. For some people, some weight regain is not as triggering, but for others, it can be very scary. And I often hear the word panic. I'm terrified. I've put so much work, effort, and emotion into my journey. I don't want to go back to where I was pre-surgery. And that's where I want to really start today. So you're having these negative thoughts. You're in a state of panic. You're in a state of stress. What often comes next is a reaction. So we're still doing this exercise, and the first part was to reflect on where your thoughts go when you notice weight regain occurring. This second part of the exercise is to reflect on what or how you usually react when you notice weight regain occurring. And I am going to paint a picture of what could be some things that you do, some actions you take. And this is from my over 6 years of working solely in the area of bariatrics, working with people every day on their weight loss surgery journey and knowing some really common ways people react and the actions they take when they notice weight regain. So one example is, and you may relate to this, is to feel you need to go back into restrictive dieting space. So that default of reaching for a diet, going into restriction, setting yourself lots of rules is a really common reaction to weight regain. And in one part of your brain, that dieting doesn't work, because if it did work, you wouldn't have needed to have bariatric surgery. And you are feeling really uncomfortable, really stressed, even terrified of regaining your weight. So you're reaching for what you do know and how to diet. So restriction dieting is one reaction and one action people take in response to weight regain. Another reaction I see a lot is people going and doing excessive activity, going back to the gym when they haven't been for some time, looking to use activity to help stop the weight regain. And another way I see people reacting is giving themselves a whole list of rules to follow. So I'm talking about this separate to the dieting reaction, because that can look a certain way, and yes, there are rules there, but even if people aren't going into a full kind of diet, they can give themselves, I need to do X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D every day, and the long list is really overwhelming. And it's not only what they're going to eat, but it's behavior change, and it's a huge list and not achievable. They're really asking themselves to turn the ship around, so to speak, 180 degrees in 1 week. And it sets them up for failure, because it's not possible to change everything. And it's under that umbrella of dieting, because it's very rules-based, but it also is very much moving into kind of that over expectations and leads to overwhelm. And when we're in overwhelm, we can only handle so much, and then we drop everything. So this activity I have talked through is actually setting you up for step 1 of the 3 steps that I'm going to share that you can step through when you notice that you are experiencing some weight regain, to help you get back on track or back into your zone. So I'm going to go through those steps now. And step 1 is to observe and reflect. So I've stepped you through 2 parts or 2 steps to move through the observe and reflect. Really observe and reflect what your thoughts are, and then what your actions are. And many people find this challenging to certain degrees, and it's also not a natural step to take when you do feel panicked, terrified, and all of those emotions that come up if you are experiencing weight regain. But it's a very valuable step, because you observe, yes, what you're thinking, you observe your actions, but we also want to reflect on, why have I regained some weight? What's changed in my diet and lifestyle? Have I had an event that's pushed me off track? What are my patterns and triggers for my eating? What was I doing 3 months ago when I was weight stable? What's changed in my life? And it is a wonderful pattern or behavior to get into doing when you do notice weight regain, is really stepping back and looking at what's changed, because you learn more about what your patterns and triggers are for your eating. You will learn more about what pushes you off course, what pushes you off track. And while there are common things in our environment and in our emotions that do push us off track, everyone's an individual, and it's really important and valuable to know what your triggers are and what your patterns are, because you get better over time at identifying when you're more likely to be vulnerable to going off track, and learning strategies and tools to support yourself to stay in your healthy eating zone and look after yourself. So observing and reflecting is the first step. And I'm a big fan of journaling, and it can be journaling on paper. Some of my clients will journal in their notes section of their phone. It's really asking yourself to stop and take a deep breath, and with compassion, look at what you've been doing or not been doing and learning from it. And we need to be in a space of compassion to do that, because it's not about self-punishing. I've not been good, I've done this, I've failed, I should have done that. It's okay, I'm human. I'm always going to go off track at some point, because you are human, you are not a robot. So it's okay, I'm going to go off track at some point. This is normal. Let me learn more about my patterns and my triggers so I know more about myself, and I'm going to get better over time at picking myself up sooner when I go off track, and learning what's the best ways for me to bring myself back into my zone, back on track. So the second step I recommend to help getting you back on track when you notice weight regain after you've done that observation and reflection is to do some simple observation and tracking of intake. And I say simple, and I'm going to talk about what I mean by simple. It's really about paying close attention to what you're eating and drinking and when. It brings awareness to what you're putting in your mouth or when you're not putting things in your mouth, meaning are you skipping meals? You get to observe, you get to see where you're at, but at the same time as doing tracking, often habits will just fall into place, the habits that you were practicing before when you were weight stable. I'm a big fan of pen on paper. Can you use apps? Yes, you can, and that's fine. But being able to do pen on paper sometimes, estimate your protein intake is wonderful. Seeing one page or one day's intake on one page is powerful because you get to see what's my protein intake for the whole day? What's the spread of my protein intake? Am I missing meals? You get to learn. But also that pen on paper, you get to make little notes about, I noticed I was stressed in the afternoon. I really wanted to go into the tea room at work and grab one of those muffins. It can really just help bring that awareness, kind of anchors you back into being mindful about your intake and your food and protein intake and fluid intake. And with that, often I find when people just do this one activity, even for like 2 or 3 days, regular eating comes and falls back into place just naturally. It just falls into place. And I'm a big fan of doing a few things well and not overwhelming yourself with 10 tasks to do to bring yourself back on track. And that's why I've got 3 for you today. Because sometimes just doing some simple tracking, protein tracking, and observing other key habits fall into place because you start being aware of them. It reminds you to do them. If you are in the weight loss phase after your bariatric surgery, well, listen up, as I have a wonderful resource you are going to love. And yes, it's free. It's called Supercharge Your Weight Loss Surgery Success Starter Kit. It's a 3-day mini course where I take you through the steps to supercharge your weight loss. You will become clear on what habits are taking you out of your weight loss zone and which are the key habits you personally need to foster to move back into where you want to be, to weight loss. Sound good? If yes, grab your free resource. The link is in the show notes. And the last step I want to talk about, of those, the 3 steps that I am suggesting for you to do to bring yourself back on track when you notice weight regain, is to move your body. And it may be a surprise the dietitian is putting that in 3, if we're doing 3 steps, wouldn't it be something to eat or something a bit more diet focused? But I really advocate moving the body. It's not about necessarily going to the gym and doing really formal activity. It's about how can you move your body in a way that you really enjoy, that puts a smile on your face. Moving the body and being active is so important, and the research supports this for weight maintenance, but also it's really great for stress relief, helping you manage negative thoughts, mental health, and sleep. And so, what we've been talking about is if you're jumping on the scales or if you're putting clothes on and you're noticing there's weight regain and you're going into panic and feeling really overwhelmed and stressed, moving the body is going to help you feel more relaxed, release some stress, reconnect with your body, and help move into more of a positive space. And when you're in a positive space, it's a lot easier to make good, healthy habits. It's a lot easier to take care of yourself. It's a lot easier to be compassionate with yourself. So moving the body is something I'm really passionate about. And as I said, finding an activity that makes you happy. So it might be dancing, it might be walking with a friend, it might be running around the park with your children, walking the dog. I've had a client go back to doing rollerblading that she did years ago. So being happy in moving your body is really, really a wonderful thing to do to help move yourself out of this feeling stressed and panicking. So to recap, today I've talked about weight regain and 3 steps you can step through when you notice weight regain to help get you back on track. And yes, only 3 steps, not 10 steps. We don't want to move ourselves from being panicking and stressed into overwhelm. We want to intentionally take these 3 steps. Step number 1, observe and reflect. How you're feeling, your thoughts, your default reaction and action of wanting to restrict, go back into dieting, going back into restriction, and also reflecting on what's changed. What are the habits or the food intake, food choices that have led to your weight regain? And it's about learning. It's not about blame, being wrong. Number 2 is doing some simple tracking of intake. Tracking protein intake, when you're eating, and observing what your intake is and being more mindful of when you're eating, what you're eating, and what you're drinking. And number 3 is moving your body. Moving that energy and that stress out of your body, helping you to manage those negative thoughts and helping support good sleep. So important. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. I really appreciate your time and your support. And I would love to ask a favor. If you find value in my podcast and in my content, I would love you to share it with someone. And in the apps, in the podcast apps, they have little 3 dots at the top of the episode or the actual podcast. It varies between apps. And if you click on those 3 dots, you can share my podcast with other people, or you can even share my podcast to your social media following. And if you do, please tag me and I will give you a shout out in my podcast. Personally, I will shout out and thank you here in this podcast. I don't formally advertise my podcast, so you sharing to anyone else that you feel could have value, get value out of my podcast is the way that my podcast grows. And I would really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. So thank you so much for your support. Thank you for listening. And I really look forward to being back in your ears next week. Bye for now.